We continue now at the top of Daf Chav Chesam and Aleph and Mesechet Kesubos. This is Kesuvos Daf 28a. The Brisa continues, Vim Haya Kohen. Let's say the person is a Kohen who divorces his wife. Rashi over here says, Vim Haya Kohen Afilu Lo Nisus. Even if the Kohen did not get married to another woman, Lo Tadur Imo B'Mavoi, she's not supposed to live with him even in the same Mavoi. The first part of the Brisa was talking about a situation where you had a Yisrael and he had divorced his wife and married another woman. So there they can't be together. He can't be together with his ex-wife in the same courtyard. By a Kohen, he can't even be in the same mavoi. Rashi over here says, Lo tadur imo b'mavoi shema yavo aleh. Maybe they'll have relations. The Kohen also begrusha, and the halacha by a Kohen is that he's also with a divorcee. Aval Yisrael, but when it comes to Yisrael, calls man shelo nisus, if he's not married, tadur b'shchunaso. So then she's allowed to live in his proximity. But in any case, you see from this brisa that there are restrictions. When you have a situation of divorce, there are restrictions of the husband and his ex-wife living in the same vicinity. And the brisa continues, Im haya kfar katan. What about if it's a small village? Can they live in the same village? What's that considered? Zeh haya ma'isa. This incident happened. V'yamru, and they said kfar katan nidon kishchuna. The Bach changes the gears over here from kishchuna kemavoi, meaning to say a kfar katan is considered like living in the same alleyway. And the Gemara continues, Mi nidchem ifnei mi. Which one gets pushed off because of the other one? Let's say they both want to live in the same courtyard. Who's the one that gets precedence? Tashma, come in here, a proof. Titania, as we learned in a brisa, he nidches mi panav. She's the one that's pushed off because of him, meaning he gets to live in that chotzer. Ve'ein hu nidchem mi panan. He's not the one that's pushed off because of her. V'im haisa chotzer shalon. Now, if it happens to be that it belongs to her, the chotzer, so then hu nidchem mi panah. So then he is pushed off from in front of her. She gets to live in the chotzer and not him. And the Gemara says, "Iboilu." They had the following question: Haisa chatzar shel shnei ma. What if they own the chatzar in partnership? What's the halacha? And so the Gemara says, Tashma, come and hear a proof. He nidches mi panav. It said before that she gets pushed off from him. What's the case over there? But my asking, and what's the case in that brisa? Ilema b'chatzar shelo. If we're talking about it's his chatzar, so pshita, so of course she's going to get pushed off. Viela b'chatzar shelo. So then you'll say she gets pushed off even if it's her own chatzar. But that's not true. Vatanya, but we learned in a brisa. Im haisa chatzar shelo. The brisa above just said that if it's her chatzar, hu nidchem mi panah, he gets pushed off from her. She gets to live in that chatzar. Elolav ki agavna. Rather, it must be that the case is exactly the situation where they own it in partnership. And so again, you see that he takes precedence. He gets the courtyard. But the Gemara says it's not necessarily a proof. Dilma de agar meger. Maybe we're talking about a situation where he's renting the courtyard. It's not a situation of ownership. So then already again, it's not necessarily a proof to a situation where they're partners in the chatzir. And the Gemara continues, my have Allah. So what is the conclusion over here? And the Gemara says, Tashma, come here, a proof from the pasuk in Yeshaya. The pasuk says, Hinei Hashem metaltelecha taltela gover. It says you'll be dislocated the way that a man is dislocated. V'yomar Rav, and Rav said, Tiltule de gaver, dislocating a man from his place. Kashan midi'ita, so it's harder from dislocating a woman. So in other words, therefore, the husband is going to take precedence in this situation, and he will get to live in the courtyard in a situation of a partnership. And the Gemara continues, Tanu Rabbanan, the rabbis taught, Lova heimena b'nichsei avia. Let's say he borrowed from her, from the property that she had from her father. She only gets paid back. You have to have an intermediary. Once they divorce, again, we're afraid for them to be in close contact with one another. So therefore, when he pays her back, it has to be through somebody else. Amar Rav Sheshes, and Rav Sheshes says, "V'yasu lekaman ladina." If they come before us for the court case, lo mizdakakinan lahu, we don't deal with them. Rav Papa, Amar Rav Papa says, "Shamute meshamtinan lahu." We go even further and we actually excommunicate them. Rav Huna Breder Rav Yoshua, Amar Rav Huna Breder Rav Yoshua says, "Negudei nami minagdinan lahu." We go even further than that and we give them lashes for doing this. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rav Nachman. Rav Nachman says, Tana be'evo Rabasi, was taught in Evo Rabasi. That is one of the minor tractates. Ba'med devar mamurim. When are all these halachas true that you have to have an intermediary, you have to keep them away from one another? Shenisgar shamin hanisuin. That's only if they got divorced after they were already married after the nisuin. Aval shenisgar shamin o erisin. But if they got divorced after the erisin, just after the betrothal, nifras al yedei atzma. So then you can have a direct payment. You don't have to have an intermediary. She'ein libo gaspa, because in that situation he's not yet comfortable with her, and therefore there's no cause for concern. And Rashi over here says, Lava heimena biyosa tachtav. In other words, he borrowed from her while they were married. Benichsei avia, from her father's property. Shahayu biyada nichsei milug. That's what we call the property that's called nichsei milug. Uvekohen shagirish es ishto kamayri. Rashi says we're talking specifically about a kohen that divorces his wife. That's why they're supposed to keep a distance from one another. Einon nifras heimenu al yedei atzma shelo yikrahu b'dvarim. Again, you can't do it directly. Be'evel rabasi mesechet hi v'kornos also smachas. Evel Rabasi is, again, it's a minor Mesechet that's called Samachas. It's about Avelus. V'zui Mishnah Rishona Shala Agos Hareu Kechai L'chol Devar. Rashi just quotes the first Mishnah of that Mesechta. And the Gemara continues, there was a situation of a man and woman who were betrothed, and in this situation, again, they divorced. They came before Rava for a case. Yosef Ravada Bar Masna Kameh, and Ravada Bar Masna was sitting in front of him. Uki Rava Shalucha Ben Tayu, and Rava put an intermediary between them. So Amar le Ravada Bar Masna, so Ravada Bar Masna said to him, V'amar Rav Nachman, but didn't Rav Nachman say, Tana be'evel Rabasi v'chula, that again it says it's only a problem when they're divorced from Nisuin, but it's not a problem if they're divorced from Erisin. Amar le, so he said back to him, Kachazina t'kagaisi bahadadi. No, we see that they're very comfortable with one another, so there happens to be a concern in this case as well. Iko di'amri, there's some that have a different version of the story. Lo uki Rava shliach ben Tayu. Rava did not put an intermediary between them. Amar le Ravada Bar Masna, so then Ravada Bar Masna said to him, Nekumar shlucha ben Tayu. The master should put an intermediary between them. Amar le said, V'amar Rav Nachman tana bevel Rabasi v'chulu. He said, no, it's not necessary. It's only from Erisin. Amar le said back to him, Hani mili heicha de lo gaisi bahadadi. No, that's only true when they're not comfortable with one another. Aval hani kachazina lo de gaisi bahadadi. But here we see they are comfortable with one another, and therefore it should be necessary. And the Gemara continues with the Mishnah, Ve'elu ne'emanim lohaid begod lon masharo bekoton. And for the following things, a person can testify when he's an adult about something that he saw when he was a minor. For example, Nemon Adam Lomar, a person is trusted to say, Zek Sav Yodo Shal Abba, this is the handwriting of my father. Zek Sav Yodo Shal Rebbe, or this is the handwriting of my Rebbe. Zek Sav Yodo Shal Achir, this is the handwriting of my brother. Zachor Hayisi Beplonis Shayotza Behinuma Varosha Parua, or I remember so-and-so that she went out at her wedding, she was wearing hinuma, or her hair was uncovered. The point is she was a basula, in order to entitle her to the 200 dinar that a basula gets in her ksuba. V'shayesh Ploni Yotzmi Beis HaSefer Litvo, or a person is allowed to testify, I remember so-and-so that he would leave the Beis HaSefer to immerse himself in order to eat truma. That's testimony that the person is a Kohen. Or you can testify that he was with us when they were distributing the truma by the granary. You can also testify that this particular place is a Beis HaPras. A Beis HaPras was an area where there was a grave that was plowed over, so you're saying that it's a Tamei area. Also, they're allowed to testify that I remember as a child that it was until this point in time that we used to walk on Shabbos. This is where the Tchum extends until. Aval ein adam neman lomer, but the Mishnah says a person is not believed to say from the time that he was a minor, that derech haya leploni v'makam hazeh, that there was a path for so-and-so in this place, meaning that this person owns this property. That already involves taking property away from somebody, so that you can't do. Or similarly, maimed umisbed haya leploni v'makam hazeh, there was a standing area, a eulogy area to so-and-so in this place. Also, it's a testimony about the ownership of the property. That already is not going to be allowed. And Rashi over here explains, zek sav yado shalabu mekaymen ashtar al piv, you can certify the shtar based on this. Afal pishamei saveh bod zakatan, even if the father died while this kid, or while this adult, or rather, while he was a minor, his father died. So again, he's only testifying on something he saw as a katan, that is okay. Shiyatzis binuma, again, she went out with hinuma. V'usimin shenisas basula, like we said earlier, hinuma was a sign that she was a basula. When she got married, uchsubasa masayim, she receives a ksuba of 200. Kedamrina v'reish pirkin, we addressed that at the beginning of the parak. Yotzis mi beis hasefer, kashayinu lamed in tinokus beis ravin, when we were in school, he used to go out, he would eat truma. Uvekulam afarish time of the Gemara, all of these will be explained, the reason in the Gemara. Rashi says that at the end of the Mishnah, there we're talking about where you're going to take money from someone. There you need full edus. And now by ksuba, why is he believed to let her get 200? The reason is the rov nashim basulos nisos, because the majority of women get married as a basula. So he's testifying to something that is anyhow true in the majority of cases. So he's believed. And finally, the Mishnah said you're not allowed to testify that there was a maimed umispid. Makom hoyolokan means so-and-so had a place over here. Lahaspid mesav, he used it to eulogize his dead. Kishemolichem lebeis hakvaros shalov elasos shamamodos umoshavos. When they would take the mace to the beis hakvaros and they would gather people there. Shiyos and shiva lemeis, when they would do the shiva for the dead. Again, you're not allowed to testify to that, because again it involves taking away property and saying it belongs to so-and-so instead of the person who has the property. And the Gemara says, Amar Rav Huna B'Reider Rav Yoshua says, V'hu sheyesh gadol imo. All of these cases where we're accepting the person's testimony that he remembers something from when he was a child, that's if there also is an adult with him who's also testifying to the same thing. And the Gemara continues with tzricha. We need all of the various cases in the Mishnah. Diashmin and Aviv, if we talked about the fact that he recognizes his father's signature, Mishum Deshchiach Gabe, because he's frequent by his father. Aval Rabo Lova, maybe his Rebbe, he wouldn't necessarily recognize. Viashmin and Rabo, if we only had the case of his Rebbe, Mishum De Islay aims to the Rabbi, because there's a certain awe of the Rebbe, and therefore you pay attention to these things. Aval Aviv Lo, but his father maybe not. V'yashmin and Hanitarti, and if we only had these two cases, Aviv Deshchiach Gabe V'Rabo Dislay Aimse, so it's true by his father, he's frequent by him. It's true by his Rebbe, there's a certain awe. Aval Achiv Delesle Loha V'Loha, but by his brother, you don't have either of these factors. Aim Alo, I might say not. Kamash Malon, so that's what the Mishnah is teaching us. Kevon Dekiyim Shtaros Midrabanan, since the certification of Shtaros is only Midrabanan, Hemnu Rabbanan Bidrabanan. So the Rabbanan allow him to testify in this case. We apply this leniency. And the Gemara continues with the two dots. The person can say, I remember as a child, Zachor Hayisi, Beplone Shiyotza Behinuma Verosha Perua. I remember so-and-so, she went out with Hinuma, and her head was uncovered. My time, and what's the reason he's believed for this? Kevin Derov Nashim Besulos Niso, since the majority of women, they get married as a Besula anyway. Giloi Milsa Bialmo, he's just revealing something that is true in the majority of cases. But Truma, the Mishnah also said he can testify that he remembers so-and-so would leave the school and immerse and go eat Truma, testifying effectively that this individual is a Kohen. And so the Gemara says, V'dilma Eved Kohen. What's the proof? Maybe he was just the slave of a Kohen who's also allowed to have Truma. And the Gemara answers, Messiah Leila Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi. Our Mishnah supports Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi. Damar Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi, because Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi says, Asr la'adam shi'lamed es avdo Torah. It's forbidden for a person to teach his Eved. He's not allowed to teach his Eved Torah, and in this case, he's remembering that the person left the Beis HaSefer. So you know it's not an Eved, and therefore you can assume it's a Kohen. The Gemara says, V'lo, but is that really true? Is it really not allowed to teach the Eved Torah? V'atanya, but we learned in a Brisa, Lova heimenu Rabo, let's say his Rebbe borrowed from him, O Shaso Rabo, or let's say his Rebbe designated him. Continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Ches Amud Beis.